And this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from the week in tech from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit in Los Angeles. Coming up, Mark Cuban speaks out. The Dallas Mavericks owner weighs in on Bitcoin, Twitter, and Trump. And LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman weighs in on how AI and technology can best serve society. But first, to our lead. While here at the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit in LA, I sat down with outspoken owner of the Dallas Mavericks and AXS CEO Mark Cuban. We covered several hot-button topics from President Trump to Bitcoin and began talking about the recent uproar over the protests in the NFL. Take a listen.
The NBA and NFL are completely different. If you know, pick any football team, you might recognize 3 players. The other 50 have no platform, no social media followings for the most part. And their only chance to make a statement about what's important to them is when the cameras are rolling and in unity. Basketball, LeBron James calls him a bum, and he has a bigger platform, right? So it's completely different. And what I said to our team was, if you have a message that you want to convey to our fans and the media, let's just say it. We'll put you on videotape. We'll say what's on your mind. If you know these types of protests that the NFL tried, you lose control of the narrative, and so it's not the right way to do it.
So you don't think they should have protested in that way?
No, I'm not saying that at all, right? I'm all for civil disobedience, right? I think for the NFL it worked, right? Because it was their only opportunity to do that. They didn't have a platform otherwise. The NBA is completely different. We have much stronger platform. We have a far better ways to communicate a message.
Is this a battle that President Trump should be picking?
No. But you know what? It's not about sports and politics, because sports is part of politics. You know, sports people, athletes, owners, whatever, endorse candidates, give money, etc. But come on. But that's who he is. Look, to me, there's 3 Donald Trumps. There's the Donald Trump who's trying to be the president. There's the Donald Trump, the salesperson, and there's the Donald Trump, the Twitter troll. Right? When he trolls on Twitter, he's fair game. Anybody can take a shot at him. When he's in campaign mode, you just ignore him. He's just selling. And when he's trying to do his job as president, hopefully you help the people who are around them to help them. I've worked with probably 4 now 3-letter agencies and done things for him that the president has no idea, because you know that's what patriotic Americans do. And you just let him pretend to be president or do his thing. And you know, hopefully the best happens. You've made your political views very clear. What are your biggest concerns about this administration? I don't know, that he just doesn't know what's going on, right? It's just not in him to make an effort to understand or learn. And you know, possibly it's because he's not capable. Possibly it's because he's not willing. I just don't see. I don't think he has it in him. Does he make it through 4 years? I'd say 25% chance, maybe 30% chance he doesn't. I'd probably be willing to bet against it, not because he's going to do something just crazily wrong, even though sometimes it seems like it, but I think it's because he's oblivious to the institutions in government and oblivious to the laws and rules, and he'll do something and won't recognize that it's an impeachable offense. You recently bought a stake in Twitter, is that correct? I just bought some shares. Why? Why now? I'm a big fan of artificial intelligence, and I think they're making some good moves. I mean, you see the evolution of the interface on both apps and the web, and I think they're going in the right direction. Should Twitter kick Trump off the platform? Nah, you can't do that. Why not? You know what? We're in a situation right now where politics is so tribal and our lives are so tribal that in that realm of people who really focus on politics, when you try to make a dramatic move, you increase the amount of tribalism, right? So if you kick him off, all the Trump fans are going to go bananas, and that doesn't do any good for anybody. And he just goes to Facebook, and then you just have the same thing, or he just posted on a website, or you know, there's 1,000 ways to post digitally, and Twitter happens to be the only one he knows how to use. But I'm sure even he can learn how to use Facebook or something else. Twitter, Facebook, now Google via Gmail and YouTube are in the crosshairs of this Russia investigation, the spread of fake news and misinformation. What is their responsibility? Well, it's interesting because for broadcast television, if you broadcast an ad that said, you swallow this penny and it'll cure every illness, right? You wouldn't be allowed to broadcast it. There are rules that prevent you from doing it. I think the same rules should apply to digital marketing and digital ads. You can't knowingly accept take money from or broadcast false advertising.
Yeah.
And the same should apply to Facebook and Twitter.
What about, that's advertising, what about content?
Well, I mean, content, look, it's not content if you're trying to promote a specific agenda, right? It's marketing. And there's a big difference. Content can be fact, content can be opinion, but state its opinion, right? Or it's fact-based, state its reporting and have a reporter assigned to it. Otherwise, it's not, and particularly what we're seeing coming out when they're using retargeting, that's advertising. When you're in this particular case, they're posting it through the ad platform. If you're posting it through the ad platform, it can't be fake news. It's a misleading advertisement, and it's the responsibility of Facebook and Twitter to recognize this is an advertising platform. We can't allow fake ads to be hosted on our platform. Last question.
Sure. You've told Bloomberg you're considering getting into Bitcoin. Have you done so yet? And what do you think of people like Jamie Dimon saying it's a fraud?
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of assets that are just their values based off supply and demand. You know, most stocks, there's no intrinsic value because you have no true ownership rights, no voting rights. You know, you just have the ability to buy and sell those stocks. They're like baseball cards. And I think Bitcoin's the same thing. Its value is a function of supply and demand. It doesn't really do anything else. I have bought some. I bought it through an ETN based on a Swedish exchange because that gave me liquidity.
Pure Bitcoin?
Pure Bitcoin, yeah. And I'm also involved with ICOs, actually token sales, because I think blockchain is a great platform for future applications. There will, just like the net and streaming created multiple great companies, I think blockchain will as well. I'm involved in something called Mercury Protocol, just to disclose that I think is going to change the messaging, it'll change messaging using blockchain.
How big is your stake in Bitcoin?
In Bitcoin, relatively small.
That was Dallas Mavericks owner and AXX TV CEO, Mark Cuban. Coming up, much more from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit in LA. We cover the shifting media landscape with Disney CEO Bob Iger. This is Bloomberg. Now more coverage from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. We sat down with Disney CEO Bob Iger to talk about the changing media landscape. It began with his outlook for ESPN, which has seen a growing amount of subscriber losses in the last few quarters.
Right now, the business model that most people access the primary ESPN content, which is live sports, 16,000 sporting events a year, is a good business model for us and a relatively good proposition for the consumer. It's working. It's not growing as fast as it once did. That's been largely what people have been focused on. But the epitaph for ESPN, it would be far too premature to write it. It's interesting you use the word mortality, otherwise I wouldn't use the word epitaph.
Well, actually, Vanity Fair used
the word mortality. I haven't read that yet. But ESPN still covers, as I said, like 16,000 different sporting events a year, 65,000 hours of programming. In a few months in 2016, I noted that about 75% of Americans watched some form of ESPN at one point or another in a month. I mean, it's still an unbelievably popular service and one that is still thriving from a profitability perspective. But the world of TV has been disrupted, and we feel we need to adjust accordingly, and that's what we're doing by launching a streaming service, and that's what we're doing that's why we invested in BAMTech, and that's why we're making available all these extra sports on a streaming direct-to-consumer basis.
Speaking of BAMTech, you mentioned on stage that you were looking into buying Twitter. You bought BAMTech instead. Why'd you decide against Twitter?
Well, what I said on stage, I was asked whether we had looked at Twitter, and what I said was we were looking for opportunities to distribute in more modern ways, in particular direct to the consumer. And we were impressed with Twitter's distribution. Twitter was not the only company that we looked at. I said that on stage. But we did look at it, and we ultimately decided that there were alternatives to that. And since we weren't really interested in owning a social media platform, but we were interested in distribution, we had been investing in BAMTech as a minority owner and decided that if there was a path to buying majority or control, then that would be the better way to go for what we wanted to accomplish.
Bloomberg had reported that perhaps Disney couldn't get over the more unsavory parts of Twitter. Is there any truth to that?
I don't really want to be specific about what we saw, except to say that our interest was new distribution, or what I'll call modern distribution, direct to the consumer, and ultimately we felt there were other ways that we could accomplish that as a company.
Meantime, Oracle is taking the fight to Amazon. Founder Larry Ellison calling its new cloud technologies revolutionary. Corey Johnson, our editor-at-large, sat down with Oracle CEO Mark Hurd at Oracle Open World.
It's called the autonomous database. So it's not a highly automated database. It's truly an autonomous database. Things like people spend hours and hours tuning databases, trying to get to perform, trying to quote unquote patch them, which has become a more well-known word over the past few months than it ever has before. All of this stuff that's had to be done technically now is going to be done automatically, autonomously, done by us. And there are a whole set of implications out of all this, Corey, but suffice to say it's extremely significant, a lot lower cost, much more secure, much more automated. It's just a fantastic set of announcements from our product team, and Larry made those last night.
What is the technology that allows this to work, not just sort of fixing itself and repairing itself, but more quickly?
Yeah, and it's really all done in quote-unquote machine-to-machine learning. So without getting into all of this, or machine learning, when you get into all of the technology under, we tried to stay away from that a bit last night and talk more about what it does. But it is basically our computer is basically getting smarter and smarter and smarter. The more data the computer has, obviously, the smarter all of the decisions that the computer makes. So all of this tuning, it's something as simple as being able to scan your data to understand potential intrusions, anomalies. I mean, I can go through all of this in a lot of detail. I know we don't have a lot of time right now, but this is basically technology doing the work. I mean, face it, today, computers can recognize faces better than humans can.
I want to ask you about M&A. Larry Ellison said on the conference call most recently that there weren't a lot of obvious targets out there for Oracle, which I think is it seemed to me a little bit of a different view on what's out there in the marketplace. You guys obviously have a robust M&A team within Oracle. Is that a change with the notion that maybe you've acquired what you're going to need to acquire and acquisitions might slow down?
Well, I wouldn't expect, Corey, much of a change in our behavior. We've always been disciplined. I think whether you hear from Larry or from Safra or from me, you'll hear the same story. I mean, we look at things that first make strategic sense for us. We don't buy things to buy things. They have to make sense strategically. They have to make sense financially for us, or we don't do them. And then third, there has to be something that we can actually run, that we can actually optimize when it gets inside the Oracle family. And so we use those filters. And I think the only point Larry was making is, compared to maybe a decade ago where there were lots of potential targets, the market is consolidating. The market is changing. The market's dynamic. And there's perhaps, I don't think it takes a lot of analysis to say there's less targets than there were before. And we'll continue to be discerning.
There are proposals before coming out of the White House with notions of repatriation of assets from overseas, and I wonder how that might change what the plans are. Would Oracle hire more? Would Oracle acquire more if there was a tax holiday and the company's able to bring some cash back?
Well, let's be clear. We've been running the company in a way to invest into the company as we speak, regardless of repatriation. So for us, we're hiring as we speak. So as you look and listen to lots of different changes in workforces and layoffs in our industry, that's not us. We've been investing, I think not 7 or 8 years ago, our headcount was about 90,000. Our headcount now is about 140,000. Some of that is M&A, but a lot of that is organic hiring. engineering, in R&D, and in sales. Now, that said, we would love to repatriate our cash to the U.S., and there's no question we would invest it in the U.S., yes.
So finally, when I covered your last earnings announcement, your competitors were quick to call to complain to me, for some reason, about your growth rates. And I wonder what you make of your cloud growth rate and how it compares to competitors like SAP and like Salesforce.
Well, again, listen, let's talk about our growth rates. I love it. Thank you for asking the question. Our growth rates are the highest they've been in years. So last quarter, we grew the company in total revenue 7%. That's total revenue of everything. Our cloud revenue was higher, revenue growth rate higher than any of our competitors. So our bookings were, last year we booked over $2 billion in new cloud bookings. This time last year, I had many people saying, hey, I don't think you'll ever get that done. We did and beat it. Our growth rate in Q1 in bookings was actually higher than it was the year before in Q1. So, Corey, listen, I mean, there's lots of people that say lots of things. I just say read the numbers, and we're in as good a position. Our applications business is growing. We made the biggest announcement of database we've ever made. We're pretty excited around here.
Coming up, much more from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. Aspen Institute CEO Walter Isaacson weighs in on the current leadership at Snap. This is Bloomberg. More from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. I sat down with Walter Isaacson, CEO of the Aspen Institute and author of the best-selling book, Steve Jobs. I started our conversation about the current status of tech giants like Facebook and Google. Take a listen.
Nowadays, Facebook and Amazon and Google in particular are so big and so creative and powerful that they could stymie competition. And it's always difficult to know how to deal with that. Jeff Bezos has a wonderful line that Steve Jobs and others have said as well, is that you shouldn't be obsessed with your competitors, you should be obsessed with your customers, and the rest will follow. And I think that's what Snap is going to do, is follow the lead of the customer. Says, okay, I want to tell stories. Okay, I want this new feature. And as long as they keep innovating, they'll stay a step ahead of Facebook.
Do you see a young Mark Zuckerberg and Evan Spiegel, or do you think they're not on the same plane?
Oh, I think Evan Spiegel and Mark Zuckerberg are deeply creative people who have a real feel for what users would want. I found Evan Spiegel to be deeply philosophical, smart, and have a great sense of leadership, which is, to me, the hardest thing. I mean, to lead a public company, that's even more difficult than creating a product. That's where Steve Jobs stumbled at one point, was he created really great products, but in about 1985, he was having trouble leading a public company, an Apple. And I think Evan Spiegel's getting over that hump. I'm deeply impressed with Evan Spiegel.
Facebook, Google, Twitter are in the crosshairs of the most important issues in the world right now. Fake news, the spread of misinformation, abuse.
Correct.
They're going before Congress now in this Russia probe. How serious is this?
It's very serious, and people have responsibility in this world. When I first went online, it was many years ago, and there was a service called The Well that was started by Stuart Brand and others. And the first words that came up were, you own your own words. In other words, you had to take responsibility for what you said. In the world now of Twitter and many other places, people can be anonymous. They can create fake news without any sense of responsibility on Facebook and Twitter. We saw that again happen in Las Vegas, but far worse, we saw it happen in the election. And I think the time has come where you can no longer say, oh, it's not our responsibility, we're just a platform.
So how do they rise to that? What do they do?
Well, it's easy. I mean, we've done it for 500 years, ever since Gutenberg invented the printing press, which is people take responsibility for what they publish. Now, that involves having humans in the mix, because with all due respect to artificial intelligence, Algorithms can't do it perfectly. You need to say, here are our values. You need to be able, people say, well, what's the difference between fake news and real news? And I say, if you have to ask that question, get out of the business. Go back to being a fisherman. YouTube
and Gmail are now at the center of this. Google has just recently pulled Russia Today from their premium ad packages. We've talked less about Google, but what about Google?
I think that one of the interesting things is that you want to balance the ability to have search, where you can have somebody can do a search and it's neutral. It doesn't sort of say we're going to bias this, that, or the other. But you also have to stop people who are putting up in the news feeds that will be searched by Google things that you know are incorrect and done intentionally incorrect. Certainly as a journalist, I know that we publish things that were incorrect in the past, sometimes things that were biased, but it wasn't done for some ulterior secret motive, and that's what's happening with fake news today. And I think you have to make that distinction if you're at Google. You have to say, all right, this thing about the Las Vegas shooter was just put up as pure fakery, and we have to find ways to get rid of that.
If indeed Facebook, Twitter, Google swayed the election in one direction or another, I mean, what is the recourse for that? What are the consequences?
Well, I think you have to look forward, which is you have to say, in this new environment, we're lucky. We used to have gatekeepers. Walter Cronkite would say that's the way it is, and most of the nation would say, okay, he's my gatekeeper. We're in a better world now, where I can go wherever I want, including Russian sources or Syrian sources or Palestinian sources to get the news. But we have to say you can't use our platform to intentionally mislead people. And as Mark Zuckerberg has said recently, we get it now. We kind of didn't do that all that well. And I suspect the people at Google are also have good values and are smart enough to figure out going forward, we're going to have to do it better.
Regulators are stepping in, especially in Europe. Do you think there's a reckoning coming for
I think
Facebook
in Europe
and Google?
In particular, there's a
Apple?
reckoning coming. I'm not somebody who's deeply in favor of on-the-spot regulations and government agencies trying to regulate information. I think that's a really, really bad idea, which is why I think it's a really good idea for Google and Facebook to step up and do it themselves.
So is it not law, self-policing, you think is what's necessary?
I think when you start having government laws telling you what information can flow, you're in a really bad place, which is why people who do get involved in the industry of the flow of information have to have certain values so that we don't have people saying we need the government to regulate the flow of information. I'm against the government regulating the flow of information.
It certainly requires a lot of trust in these companies, though.
It does, and they've lost that trust, and I think when they lose that trust, it's bad for them, so they should be trying to regain the trust, and I think they are trying to regain the trust.
That was Walter Isaacson, CEO of the Aspen Institute. Coming up, much more from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit here in Los Angeles. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn co-founder and partner at Greylock, talks to us about the future of AI. And a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Well, we have many more highlights from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit here in LA. I sat down with Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn founder and a partner at Greylock, and talked about the current debate around the future of AI and if the benefits outweigh the dangers. Take a listen.
I actually think AI has huge potential. Solve disease, bring education and medicine to the whole world, be able to enable even, for example, space colonization. I do think there are risks, and so I think we need to be careful about how we're doing it. Careful doesn't mean slow, but careful means intelligent.
What are the risks?
Well, the actual real risks, once you get past the science fiction description, which I tend to say, the Terminator movie and everything else, is very vivid in our imagination, but not the real risks. The real risks are things like, well, we already have algorithms running our lives. We have them doing credit, Equifax and so forth. We have them doing judgments on parole and parole violation. All of these things have impacts that are currently like black boxes to us, and we want to have a good society. So I think those are actually the near-term risks. And then there get questions around cybersecurity, and there's a whole set of things that come out. But the whole science fiction risk is a ways out.
Elon Musk told my colleague Ashley Vance that, in this scenario of robots taking over the world, Alphabet or a company like Google could inadvertently do evil, create this robot army. Does the future of AI rely on the good intentions of these companies, and can we trust them?
So I don't think it necessarily is relying on the good intentions of companies, because, by the way, you have thousands of people working in these companies, thousands of people working on these projects. That gives you a very broad scope of potential whistleblowers. Like, they're people, if they see something wrong, they can speak up. I do think the thing is to be intentional about what is the thing that best helps society. And I think that is, for example, design AI to help, pay attention to the question of how do we have good human outcomes, and how do we do that? And I think that's actually what's going to happen. Now, the examples that, for example, Elon told Ashley were things like, well, you cause it to, well, I don't know if this is one he told Ashley, but you tell the AI to eliminate spam, and it says eliminate all human beings. That's actually kind of fictional. Like, you can actually, as you're building the safety measures into these devices, you say, look, as you ask for more resources or as you articulate your goals, have humans in the loop. That's a simple safety measure. I already know that Google's thinking about that. I already know that Microsoft's thinking about that. I already know that Facebook's thinking about that. So I don't think it's a rely on the good intentions.
So is this fear-mongering irresponsible, as Mark Zuckerberg said?
I think it's dangerous because it causes the discussion not to focus on the real issues. So we all talk about, robots marching in the streets versus how are algorithms already influencing our lives, and what are the things we should do for transparency, for the right kinds of social outcomes. It isn't that we shouldn't think about the science fiction dystopias at all, but we should think about them in ways of steering towards the utopias.
Facebook, Twitter, Google, they're all being called before Congress in the middle of this big Russia investigation. They say they're adding more humans to the problem. Can AI really fix this problem, or is it something that only a human can do?
I think both. AI can get better because you say, well, this is like, for example, here's a weird ad buy. Here is something that looks like it's external forces trying to do political ads. Now let's have some humans look at it. So I think the answer is actually both. I think the answer is to improve the AI to detect it, just like you would detect fraud or malicious cyber attacks or anything else, and then have humans get involved and they go, oh, this is weird. Take a look at this.
So what about when it comes to robots and jobs? I know we always ask about it, but it seems like the ground is shifting beneath us as we speak. Are jobs under threat, and how many of them?
Well, so I think jobs will get transformed a lot, just as any technological revolution changes them. Like, people had this worry moving from agriculture to the city. They had this worry in manufacturing. I think it's another worry, the similar thing. We have to pay attention to people because in these transitions, they can be very difficult. However, I don't think that means jobs are just going away. I think technology also usually creates a lot of new jobs. So, like, an AI may read your radiology exam a lot better than a radiologist, but a radiologist can still be there to talk to people, can still be there to look at the weird cases that the AI goes, this is weird, I don't know about this, that kind of thing. And so that's the kind of transformation that I think we should be building the technology for. Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they all are in a race to get there, to be better. Who wins? Well, I think in technology, I think they're all going to win, and I think they're going to win in different ways. I think you'll get, kind of great voice stuff from all three companies. I think you'll have Google doing this is the one big pile of data. I think you'll have Microsoft doing hey, if you want to be building AI with confidential or private data, we'll partner with you. I think it'll all be in different directions. You are also working on a very well done podcast called Masters of Scale, where you talk to viewers about how founders take their companies from 0 to 1 to infinity and beyond. I'm thinking about a company like Uber, and what are the lessons in that about
what not to do, not just for founders, but for investors?
So I think that part of the thing is to make sure that you start asking the social impact questions early. Doesn't mean you orient necessarily your whole company around them, invest massive resources in the beginning, but you say, look, what is our mission and how is our mission best evolved for helping people? So for example, like in the Uber case, it's like, well, how do we help drivers as well? How do we make sure that we're increasing safety early on? And you ask those questions early, which is, I think, actually, in fact, and I'm a board member, but I think Airbnb did well. So I think Airbnb is a positive example of doing this. And so I think it's still scale very fast. That's still the way you build a globally impact transformation. And by the way, if you don't do that, then you're not the company that has impact. But it's to add in these social questions as you're doing it.
And what is the job of investors along the way to make sure they're checking that behavior?
Well, I think the job of investors, very straightforward, is to say, look, you're in this intense cycle of this exponential curve. Let's help bring resources, questions, people to you to bring in these other voices as well. And I think that's one of the things that my partnership does well.
Something else that you're doing on Masters of Scales is you got a 50-50 gender ratio for the guests and the people that you're featuring. You were very outspoken in the midst of this rash of sexual harassment allegations in tech, in VC. You asked investors to sign a decency pledge. Curious if you're doing anything to take that forward, because while a decency pledge is great, just saying you're decent doesn't mean you are.
Yes, although the specific thing on the decency pledge was to be able to stand up publicly and say, I won't do business with bad actors here. And by doing it publicly, your friends, other people around you can kind of hold you accountable, saying, hey, you said that, look, you're doing this. So it has a little bit more teeth than zero. But I'm having a bunch of conversations with people about what are the things we should do to take it to the next level. And unfortunately, all I can say there is watch this space.
That was LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman. Well, the Star Wars sequels have been a huge success for Disney, and more films are on the way. Bob Iger, Disney's CEO, talked about Star Wars and what's currently driving results at the box office.
I think quality wins, and I think what we saw this summer was not as much quality as the audience would have liked, and it was reflected in the box office. I just think it was a function of that. Now, that said, there's a lot of things out there for people to do. There's more competition for people's time and money, particularly when it comes to leisure activity. It means that the bar is raised in terms of delivering quality or delivering experiences that people really want and enjoy. And of course, there's word of mouth. You can't hide from anything. Meaning, if something is mediocre, people not only find out about it right away, but they frequently know about it right away before it even comes out. So I think if there's something to be learned, it's concentrating even more on quality. I think there is probably more challenge out there for smaller films today than ever before, again, because of competition for people's time. The big films, particularly the big good films, the business we're in, I think basically they'll thrive and continue to for a long time, as long as they're good.
So Star Wars, Thor, will that turn things around?
Well, I think Star Wars and Thor will be great for us and good for the business. I'm looking forward to bringing both films out, November and December.
That was Disney CEO Bob Iger. Coming up, more from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit, we sit down with Discovery CEO David Zaslav as the company nears completing its massive acquisition of Scripps. This is Bloomberg. We're at the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit in LA talking with the biggest names in tech and media about massive changes the industry has seen in the last few years. One company here is Discovery, which launched more than 30 years ago, but is working to stay current right now with major deals and new programming. David Zaslav, CEO of Discovery Communications, joins us to weigh in.
Well, we really don't see bigger, better, but we do see the way people are consuming content is changing, and the type of content people are consuming are changing. So the reason that we did Scripps is that they have great quality brands and they own all of their content. So we see it really as we're acquiring 200,000 hours of IP and great brands that have really saturated the US in a great way, HGTV and food and travel and cooking and DIY. But it really hasn't proliferated around the world. We launched some food and home channels around the world, and we're very successful. So we think with their brands and library, we could take it around the world. But more importantly, as people start to consume content on all devices, we can take a lot of that content and the content that we own. We're the largest IP media company in the world. We have more global brands than anyone else. So Discovery, Animal Planet, TLC, OWN, Science. If we close on Scripps, Food, HGTV, Travel, those we can provide everywhere in the world on every device because we own everything on it. And so, we see an ecosystem that's in some kind of moderating growth in some markets and some decline in others, but relatively healthy, mid-single digit versus double digit or mid-teens several years ago. But now we have a load of IP we could take direct to consumers on their phones. Ultimately, if you're interested in Italian cooking or food, or if you love Discovery or Science, we can deliver it right to you on your phone because we own all the content.
When it comes to Group 9, are you seeing traction with a younger, more millennial audience there?
So we're seeing huge traction in terms of the scale of consumption of of the content on Group 9. It's over 6 billion views a month. We're the largest provider of short-form news on Facebook. So those that would see Now This, that's us, and it's growing rapidly. It's not making money yet, but we are one of the largest providers on Facebook, with usually 1 or 2 minute stories. We're also the largest, one of the largest providers on Snap, and that's an almost full millennial audience. And so we have our traditional business where we're taking content around the world an hour, half hour, mostly on channels. We'll now be able to take that direct to consumer, either in bundles or individually. But we have this short form studio effectively with Group 9, where we're the number 1 or 2 or 3 player in the world in terms of short form content. And it was helpful to us even as Facebook was looking to build mid form content, series that are 4, 5, or 6 minutes. We were able to get a lot of those series because we're already a top provider to Facebook. The challenge is it's not making money yet.
Right.
So we have huge scale and we have great name recognition and brand awareness. But now we have to take it. And we're working with Facebook, we're working with Snap on how we really monetize that.
So speaking about the need to make money, there's been speculation about job cuts coming with the Scripps acquisition. How many jobs? I mean, what kind of efficiencies are you working through?
Well, we really look at it as two things. Yes, there's going to be significant synergies. I mean, we've stated about $350 million. We think there could be more than that. But it's really, the idea is we have 2 great companies that do quality content. When we put them together in the U.S. alone, we'll have more than 20% of viewership on cable. And we have 5 of the top 6 or 7 women's networks with ID and OWN and TLC and HGTV and Food. But we're then going to invest a lot more in content and going direct to consumer. So we really view the company as, if we close on this acquisition, or when we do, as being kind of breaking it in half. The right side is growth, and that's owning more IP, providing that content in different ways on different devices in all languages all around the world, and getting more viewership, more scale, more people spending more time with us. The left side is cost, and we have to attack that. And we think that we could really do a good job of attacking that, and we would have needed to do that even if we didn't do Scripps, because the industry is changing.
And do you see doing more deals? Will you be doing more M&A?
Sure. I mean, I think, we've said that we think Scripps is a very good deal for us, but one of the big attractions is we pick up more IP, more quality brands, but 18 months after we close, we'll be less than 3.5 times levered, and then we'll be a $35 billion company with a bigger balance sheet, so we can go out and buy more of the stuff that we're going to need so that we can be more successful in the future.
Speaking of sports, we've seen Amazon and Facebook, non-traditional players, pay up for sports rights.
Right.
What's next that they could get?
Well, look, they're in the marketplace, and we're actually working with both of them. Amazon, in particular, we're doing a lot of work with. We have a direct-to-consumer product already. We've been at it for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years in Europe, We're the leader in sports in Europe with Eurosport, where we have the traditional ESPN type business, where we have Eurosport has 3 sports channels in every country in Europe. But our model in Europe is a little bit different than the sports models in most other countries around the world. One, where we have a dominant position on linear, where we're the only pan-European player. But all the sports that we've acquired, the Olympics through 2024, tennis, cycling, handball, football in a number of markets, we own all that IP for all platforms. And so most sports platforms buy the rights just for linear or the cable channel. So if you go to Europe in a year and Vodafone or Deutsche Telekom or BT are selling rights to see the French Open or to see the Olympics or to see Tour de France, they're buying it from us. And so we're way long on sports IP. We have Eurosport that's profitable, but we think over the next couple of years, we'll be able to sell to the super fans of tennis and cycling and the Olympics and Olympic sports, and we'll be able to go direct to consumer in a much more scalable fashion. We're already getting some real traction.
How many sports-free direct-to-consumer TV packages will there be by the end of the year?
In Europe right now, in most markets, it's just us.
Yep.
There are a couple of the bigger markets like Germany and the UK where there are more. But in most markets right now, it's just us, and we got a great jump on it. I think that more and more, if somebody loves squash, we have all the squash. If somebody loves speed skating or tennis, that will be, I think, a very attractive model, because people, the way you would buy a magazine if you love golf or tennis or cycling, across Europe, 750 million people, all the people that love a particular sport will be able to buy that from us and get all of it.
David Zaslav, CEO of Discovery Communications there. Coming up, we bring you one last conversation from the Vanity Fair New Establishment Summit. We talk to the man at the center of it all, Vanity Fair editor Graydon Carter. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Graydon Carter, who helped make Vanity Fair magazine a must-read publication in Hollywood studios, Washington townhouses, and Wall Street corner offices, is stepping down after 25 years as one of the nation's most influential editors. Carter joined me to discuss his decision to leave the magazine at the end of the year, tech's fake news problem, and the future of the magazine business.
I've done it for 25 years. I wanted to take a break. I've worked solidly for the last 39 years. And if I have a third act in me, I would like to find out what it is.
You've made a point of taking on Trump. Why not stay and continue that?
I stayed. I originally was going to leave in April, and the election sort of nixed that, and I decided to stay on until the first year of the administration.
So what do you hope the next administration of Vanity Fair, how do you hope they cover this administration?
Well, it'll be up to them, and that was a personal sort of mission of mine. I had two political missions. One was the Iraq War, which I was very against, and one was the administration of Donald Trump, which has turned out worse than I even expected. And I think it bears examination, which the press is doing an amazing job, especially the newspapers. So we'll see what happens.
In the era of fake news and misinformation, you've got newer technology companies like Facebook and Google and Twitter in the crosshairs. They are going to be appearing before the intelligence committees in Congress. What is the responsibility of these platforms?
Well, at a certain point, they are sort of publishers. And if you have a newspaper and you run a letter to the editor written by somebody who's not on your staff and it's inflammatory and perhaps libelous, you could be liable there too. So once you get into this business, you have to take the responsibilities that come with that business. And that is ensuring that what you publish or present is accurate. They'll figure out a way to do it.
What does the future of the magazine business look like to you?
It'll change. I mean, it's changed dramatically over the last, say, 50 years. It won't be as robust as it is now, but it may, necessity is a great means of like getting people to do things they hadn't tried before. And I think that even, I know Vanity Fair, we have a very healthy digital business, and we have a very healthy live business like this. And we wouldn't have had that 10 years ago if not out of need and out of organic growth.
How much longer will there be a print edition of Vanity Fair?
I think there'll be a print edition of Vanity Fair as long as you're alive, possibly. You're a young person, yes.
Will it have the same thickness, the glossy pages? Will it look and feel the same?
I think we're going through a temporary lull in advertising pages, and I think the quality advertisers will realize that everything they want, they can't necessarily get on the digital space, that there's nothing quite like a magazine for presenting something to urge other people to buy it. It's, you can't be, it's right there, it's very hard to avoid it, you can't click over it, and you can't be hacked and disrupted. A magazine's a pretty brilliant invention.
Cy Newhouse, the publishing magnate, recently passed away. Do you think the Newhouse family has the same commitment to publishing? Does the industry change as a result?
Well, the Newhouse family publishing is in their blood, and I think that they have an enormous commitment to Condé Nast and to changing Condé Nast in the ways that will have to be changed over the next 5 to 10 years.
So the New Establishment list, the New Establishment Summit, other babies of yours.
Right.
This is where we are. Does this live on?
Oh, this will definitely live on, and it's a great sort of culmination of a lot of what we do in the magazine, and it brings a lot of these worlds together, and it is very much part of the magazine's DNA.
You have a fascinating insight, in doing this list for so many years, into how the balance of power has changed and will change. You were on stage with Travis Kalanick, who was CEO of Uber at the time. Last year, this time, much has happened since then. What do you make of how fast things can change?
Well, he's not gone completely. He's just had a temporary setback, which I think all...
He hopes.
Yeah, he hopes that all great business leaders have at some point in their careers. I think he's an impressive young man, and I think he'll come back.
And what do you see in terms of the balance of power shifting between technology players and media players and political players? Like what
when we originally did the New Establishment, probably 60% came from the world of entertainment, probably 20% from technology, and 20% from the information businesses. And now it's about a third. So and whereas 5 years ago it was probably 70% technology. So it changes dramatically from year to year. And that's what makes it interesting.
I'm sure you've given some thought to what your third act might be.
Yeah.
What might it be? Please share.
It'll be roughly within this realm. I just got to refine it, and I'm taking some time off to do that. I want to lie on my back and look at the ceiling and think for a while.
Graydon Carter there, editor of Vanity Fair. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We will bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. Tune in each day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Tech are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.